Hello, everyone. It is 3 p.m. Chicago time, 4 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, the 26th of June, 2018. Okay, I'm stuck at 2016 for some reason. Today, we're here for a Convergent Trader Spotlight with Aaron Fifield. He's the host of Chat with Traders and a former GQ model, apparently. um, the goal today is to get an understanding from Aaron about the wealth of knowledge that he's picked up from his interviews and to see what we can assimilate into our own trading. A quick word on convergent trading. Convergent trading is basically is essentially a virtual prop environment. There is no we don't back traders or anything, but my goal with Convergent is to recreate the proprietary trading environment that I had here in Chicago, but to make it available to those who are serious about trading and want to be career professional traders. So there's a lot of discourse. The first phase of it is the member community, and that includes the chat room, the continuous study halls, study sessions, stat sessions, impromptu webinars, these trader spotlights, and so on and so forth. The second phase is the actual trader development program, where we would be putting traders through a full-on course like we would have in a prop firm, a proper course, and so on. What is a trader spotlight? Trader spotlight seeks to bring someone into the spotlight. That someone could be an industry figure, or it could be a trader who may even be just making the turn, or somebody who is approaching the market in a very unique way, and we spotlight what they're doing just to continuously expand our horizon of what is out there and what we can do for ourselves as traders. And the goal of today's event is really to gain as much as possible from Aaron's experience over the last 3.5, almost 4 years of being a trader for himself since 2012, but also for all the knowledge that he's gained from interviewing a huge number of people. Aaron's background: he took interest in trading in
Morad,
2012. Yeah,
disclaimer. Sorry,
a
disclaimer
disclaimer.
before we
Yeah,
get
I
into.
apologize. I have to always read this disclaimer. Derivatives trading is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. Thank you. Aaron took interest in trading in 2012. He launched Chat with Traders. You can find that at chatwithtraders.com in 2015. Aaron's goal with this podcast was to come into contact with experienced traders in the industry and to have an opportunity to pick their minds about trading. By the way, Aaron's podcast was the first podcast on trading I'd ever heard. It's really interesting to get an inside look of the mindset, the approach, and there's even some technical discussion of what algo traders or crypto traders or whatever are doing. I find it to be very, very rich in content. I definitely invite you to check out the website. The podcasts are absolutely free. They're there. You can access them from his website or through your favorite podcasting app, through iTunes and so on. Aaron has conducted over 162 full-featured in-depth interviews with various candidates, and amazingly has accomplished this in 3.5 years. Let me bring Aaron on. Aaron, are you with us?
I am. Morad, how you doing?
Welcome aboard. Thanks for taking the time to be with us. I know it's very, very early there. What is it, 6 a.m., something like that?
Yeah, it's just gone past 6 a.m., but I'm normally up around this time anyway, so no stress.
Aaron's in Australia. So let's get going here and shed some light on your background and history. What got you interested in trading in the first place?
I guess it was something I knew about, and when I say knew about, I mean I knew about this thing called the stock market, and that's pretty much where it ended. So I guess I was just curious to find out a little bit more about it. Of course, I kind of got the idea that people could make money from investing in companies. And as I started to try and learn a bit more about it, I just naturally gravitated towards trading rather than investing, although both appeal to me nowadays. Uh, and I guess, yeah, it was just a little curiosity to begin with. And then over time, it sort of developed into more of an obsession. And, over the years, it's become more and more of my focus.
Just to follow up to that, was there like a figure or somebody who you knew who was already into it that got you into it, or was it something that you just simply found on your own?
No, it was more a thing. So, I mean, anyone who's heard my story before has probably heard me say this, but I bought an investment property when I was quite young. I was about 20 years old, and I sort of figured, okay, what do wealthy people do? They invest in property and they invest in the stock market or the share market. And so I was like, okay, I've got my foot in the door of the property game. I should find out a little bit more about how to do the stock market. So I think that's where it came from. But no, I didn't know anyone who was involved in it. Thinking back when I was probably about 15 I just started working, and one of the guys who I worked with, I remember he would occasionally tell me about how he had some shares in these blue chip stocks, and how, I mean, I'm not sure how well he knew or how much he knew what he was doing, but it seemed kind of bizarre to me that he could invest in these companies, and it almost seemed like a bit of a punt as well,
Yeah.
because he didn't really, I don't know, he didn't have much of a strategy, and I didn't really know what questions to ask him, and he was just sort of a mum and dad investor. But I guess that might have had something to do with it as well. But yeah, I think the idea of trying to put some money to work in real estate and also the stock market kind of appealed to me, and that's what initially got me interested.
Okay, great. How did you come up with the idea for Chat with Traders? What motivated you to go out and seek out people to interview?
I mean, it just seemed like a really fun thing to do. So at the time, I was running a graphic and web design business, and I was just I was pretty over it. And I thought about it one day, and I was like, I really enjoyed listening to podcasts, and I'd always learned a lot from them. And I thought, there is no way I could do a podcast about graphic and web design because I just wasn't passionate about it. I was like, I had no desire to speak to anyone who was like leading the way in graphic design or web design or whatever it may be. Like it was just kind of a job. I didn't really have much of an interest in it. I mean, I did when I first started it, but it became a bit mundane. And trading was something that I'd done a little bit of on the side, and I read a few books about it, and it kind of appealed to me. And I just thought, it would be really cool and really fun, and I would love to have these conversations with professionals in the field.
Mm.
And a lot of the people who I've had on the podcast, well, some of them can be quite hard to contact and get in touch with. And I felt as though by starting a podcast, creating a platform, uh, it would give me some leverage to be able to speak to people who otherwise might not have access to, and then, of course, share those conversations with other people who are interested in listening in. So, I guess that's where it started from. It was just it was a subject I had passion for, I was interested in, and I was curious and thirsty to know more about it.
Do you
Um,
do any graphic design work or web work anymore, or is trading and the podcast occupying all of your time now?
yeah, I let that go a few years ago.
Got it.
So that was nice. I think I was doing it for the first year of the podcast. So I started the podcast in 2015. There was kind of that overlap period. But by the end of 2015, the podcast had sort of grown to a level where if I was to have sponsors on the episode, that would kind of replace or substitute my income
Mhm.
from design work and that sort of thing. So yeah, so since then it was just been the podcast.
Very cool. Have you found that podcasting is a good medium to connect with traders? If so, why?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of great benefits that come from doing it. I mean, first of all, by having the podcast, it kind of gave me an excuse and a platform, like I mentioned, to be able to speak with other traders. Sort of was, I guess, a bit of a point of difference. Uh, but I think there's a lot of great benefits that come from doing the podcast. Um, for myself, it certainly opens up some opportunities. I'm trader manager at a proprietary trading firm in Sydney now. I mean, that wouldn't have come about if it wasn't for the podcast. Uh, but it also opens up a lot of opportunities for the guests, which I've had on. And also, I think it creates a sense of community. I mean, this is probably something I haven't pushed to its full potential, but like the couple live podcast events I've done, I just did one recently. They're a lot of fun. It gets, you know, 100 and I think there's about 170 people there at the last event. It gets like industry professionals in a room. You've got a whole, the whole spectrum of traders. You've got traders who are just starting out. Guys have been doing it for a few years. Industry professionals. You've got brokers. You've got heads of prop firms. All in a room. So it creates a great sense of community and kind of connects a lot of people that way. So
Mhm.
I think it's pretty cool in that sense. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question exactly or if I got a
Yeah,
bit
it seems to
off
be.
topic.
It does. It seems to be podcasting is becoming more and more relevant in our industry, whereas before podcasting was mostly for political shows or hobbyists and things like that. But I
Yeah,
do
I think
find go ahead.
I think when I first started the podcast in 2015, I mean, a lot fewer people actually understood what a podcast was. And I mean, all it is really just a piece of audio. But yeah, I remember having to try and explain what a podcast was to some of my friends and that type of thing when, I was telling them about how I was starting this podcast, etc.
Yeah. Well, the thing with podcasts that I love is that they're portable. You can learn a whole lot while you're driving, running, working out, whatever. It makes it so that you don't have to be on the screen to actually gain something. How do you
Yeah,
usually find your guests?
that's a good question, and I don't really have a down pat system for finding my guests. They sort of come from here, there, and everywhere. That might be I might read about them in a news article. Maybe it's a Bloomberg article or something like that. It might be a suggestion. So maybe someone I've had on previously will say, "Hey, I've got a buddy of mine who would make a really great guest on your show," or something like that. So introductions, also suggestions from listeners. Uh, to be honest, I get a lot of suggestions which aren't great,
Hmm.
um, as you could probably imagine. But occasionally, there's a diamond in the rough, and so sometimes through suggestions, making me aware of people who otherwise probably wouldn't be aware of. Uh, I occasionally have someone who might be a listener of the podcast who's listened for a year or so, and they just reach out to say, enjoy your podcast, whatever. And, if you're looking for a guest, I'd be willing to come on. My experience is this and that.
Mm.
Also, authors of some books I've read, documentaries, for example, the documentary Wall Street Code. Have you seen that?
I have not, and now I will.
Okay. Yeah, it's great. It came out a few years ago. It's available on YouTube. But for example, I really enjoyed that documentary, and I've since been able to interview a lot of the names which were featured in that documentary. There's one person I'm actually sort of trying to get on the podcast at the moment. I'm not having a great deal of success so far, but it takes a bit of persistence. Is Carson Block, who I came across through the China Hustle documentary.
Hmm.
He's a sort of a quote unquote activist short seller. I think he'd be really fascinating. Blogs, Twitter, that sort of thing. So yeah, like I mentioned, it really here, there, and everywhere.
Very cool. I'm going to move this along just a little bit faster. What was the most mind-blowing interview you've had in terms of aha moments? I mean, you've done 160 plus interviews. Can you put a finger, and I know you don't want to discriminate amongst your guests. It's like having children and being asked what your favorite is. But what to you personally was the interview that just blew you away? Like, oh my God, I never looked at trading this way, or I've never looked at investing this way. Can you put a finger on that?
Yeah, so I thought this question might come up. It's very difficult to answer. You know, I think from each episode, and some more so than others, there's there's a certain something you get from that person. Like that person has a thing. Uh, I guess maybe mind-blowing interview. I mean, I think I might have to say Ed Thorpe. I don't know if it was many aha moments from it, but it was certainly a fascinating story and an amazing life that he's lived. Uh, Ed Thorpe, maybe Blair Hull has also done some major things. Tony Saliba, that dude's a boss. Um, I don't know. I don't know.
Those are good.
Yeah,
We'll include
I
those in the show notes on the podcast. We'll and on the web page we'll include the links to those interviews as well.
cool.
Uh, what five key ideas, and you can cut that down to three if it's racking your brain. What five key ideas or nuggets did you gain through your interviews that you believe everyone should apply to their own trading journey? What key things that just keep recurring, or you feel are just really important key nuggets that you picked up with regards to trading?
Okay. Well, last year I was actually asked to give a talk at an event here in Australia, which was put on by Nick Raj, and I came up with a subject for the talk, and it was 6 ways to emulate talented traders. So I'm going to reflect on that because, I put a lot of thought and preparation into that talk, and I think these 6 points are fairly sound. So I'll add one to your five. The first one was to have an unstoppable demeanor. Two, play the long game. Three, know your strategy intimately. Four, trade with an edge. Five, manage your lifeblood risk. Stick to the game plan is number six.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think those 6 things, I know I just kind of ran through them there very briefly, and I'm happy to go into any of them a bit further if you'd like me to. But, you know, I think that sums it up fairly well. Those are things, those themes keep popping up time and time again from the various people who I speak with.
When you say unstoppable demeanor, would you equate that with the word grit?
Absolutely, yeah.
Is that the
So I
same
actually used
thing?
absolutely. So I actually used a quote from an interview for each of those, and the quote I had for that one it comes from Darren Reed, and he says the number one thing is grit. You need to be like a bulldog that gets his teeth around a bone and will not let go.
Hmm.
So essentially, it means, if you want to have any chance of making it as a trader, you have to be, exactly like I said, you have to have an unstoppable demeanor because, you know, time and time again, you're going to get knocked down. You need to keep pushing forward.
Absolutely. It's one of the key elements I look for in prop traders for backing. How have these interviews shaped your own trading journey? It sounds like there's been a huge amount of impact from your podcast towards your where you are now with this prop shop that you're working with. Is that correct?
Yeah. I had did this live podcast or this event a couple of weeks ago, and I got a chance to speak with a lot of people, beforehand and afterwards. And this is something that I got asked a couple of times, and sort of made me think about it. I think what it has given me, it's given me, and I'd like to think, everyone who frequently listens to the podcast as well, a really solid understanding of how different traders actually make money in the markets and where they find an edge. And I think that's a good thing to have an understanding of as a trader, to kind of know how other participants are viewing markets, where they see opportunity and how they're going about it. You might not know the finite details of their strategy, etc., but you get an idea about where different people um, how they make money.
Hmm.
If someone is an equities day trader, for example, uh, you know, you kind of have a bit of an idea about how they make money. Like if they maybe they play catalyst, they're focusing on stocks and play. So, there's big news which is price sensitive, it's going to affect the stock price. Um, that might be their thing. So, yeah, I'm kind of going around in
Hmm.
circles here, but I think it's very valuable to understand how different participants are engaging in the market and where they're finding their opportunity. I think it's also in some ways removed doubt that it's possible to become a trader.
Did you have a lot of
Uh,
doubt when you got into this?
I guess so. I wouldn't say a lot of doubt. I mean, I'd like to think I was always fairly confident in my ability. I mean, I kind of looked at it as though, you start any job or you start any career, you have no knowledge in that field. But once you do it for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, you just kind of begin to do it without even really thinking about what you're doing to a
Hmm.
certain extent. But it sort of almost becomes second nature. So I felt as though trading maybe a little bit more difficult than what I just made it sound there, but along similar sort of lines.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah. So, but the point I'm sort of making there is that a lot of people, so many people I've spoken with, they all come from different backgrounds. They all approach the markets in different ways. So it just kind of, it's really made it made it seem as though it's possible to, you know, be successful in the market, regardless of where you've come from or that type of thing. So a lot of it's about process.
Yeah, and it's the process that ultimately provides results, and the results, the extent of results that you get, are a function of the edge that you are working in the markets. It's those are tied together. But I know that many. I came online about 10 years ago into this to get a glimpse of what's happening to online traders and what's called the retail part of the industry, and I was shocked to see how um, often people actually were doing this, were giving up a lot to do this, but they had no way to know that if it can really be done. So
Yeah,
your comment with regards to giving you the confidence that, hey, this can be done, it's really big for a lot of members of the audience, I believe, because there's always this doubt that this is a sucker's game. You can't really make money unless you're teaching or selling something. But my effort has been to basically say, well, it's a function of what you put into it, and again, it's a function of your process and how you trade your edge. It's really a lot of it's a mental game.
yeah.
Um,
And I mean, I've seen guys who make huge amounts of money, like I've seen it with my own eyes, and that they're no smarter than you and I. A lot of them are just very diligent, focused. A lot of them follow those 6 points I outlined earlier, and they follow their process, and they have a lot of discipline.
Hmm. We'll go into your trading style in a minute. We're wrapping up with the podcast. What areas of trading do you think should be put more in the spotlight for traders? And I think you may have answered this with your 6 points, 6 ways to emulate successful traders that you discussed earlier. Do you have anything else, any areas that you believe people should be made more aware of in the
Yeah,
public in terms of improving their overall outcome?
yeah, absolutely. I've got a couple things I'd like to add. So, I mean, I think the first one, and I know this is something you preach quite a bit, and I think uh, when you were on Chat with Traders those couple times, it's something that we also spoke about, is thinking probabilistically. And I think that's something which could possibly be talked more about amongst the trading community. So just having a basic understanding of probabilities, I think, is going to be very beneficial to you as a trader. And also what ties in with that is having an understanding of the biases which traders are subject to, or prone to be victim of. I think that's a big one. And I'll
Can
mention
you
an episode.
if
Hey,
I
sorry.
I know I'm interrupting you, but I just wanted to catch you right in that moment. Biases. Can you give an example of a bias that you're referring to in
Yeah,
that
absolutely. So,
context?
an example in my trading the other day. So I came in and, I'd been doing all right the past few weeks, and I figured I'm going to try and trade a little bit more size today. And I came in, first trade out of the gate, more size than, not huge amount, and I'm not doing massive size, but it was bigger than I would normally trade. And the trade went against me pretty quickly, and I got stopped out, and it was a loss. It was a losing trade. And immediately I was like, oh shit, I shouldn't have put so much size on that trade. Maybe it wasn't a great setup. And, I started to doubt myself a little bit until I sort of pulled myself into check. And it was like, that trade very easily could have gone in your favor. That could have, I could have done very well on that trade, and I would have felt like the man. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I thought of something, and that's, don't be a victim to a sample size of one. So pretty much when you put on a trade, I mean, it can be the best setup and it can have everything in its favor, and it can still just not work. So that's sort of what I mean by biases. And I also mean, because my focus over the past couple years has been a lot on the quantitative side of things, like developing algos, etc. That's taught me a lot about biases as well. So
Yeah, hold that thought though. We're going to get to that in just a minute.
okay.
So the big thing you
Just
want to
let me just
spotlight. Go ahead.
let me just add one thing there,
Hmm.
because I think this will be helpful to sort of drive my point home. There's an episode I did with Delaney McKenzie from Quantopian, uh, and maybe you can link to it in the show notes. But the episode's called "You Don't Know How Wrong You Are," and the whole episode we just talk about different biases which traders can fall victim to. So I think that's one that's well worth listening to.
Excellent. We will definitely link that in. Okay. I believe this is the second to last question about the podcast segment. You've been setting up some very successful meetups. I believe there was one in New York, and you've done one in Sydney, I believe. How is that going? And is that something you're developing as part of what you're doing for your audience, or what's going on there?
So it kind of just seemed like a fun thing to do. Uh, I did the first one in New York last year, and then I did another one in Sydney towards the end of last year, and I did another one just a couple of weeks ago. And the way I see it is, it's just an extra level of engagement. So I've been doing the podcast for a bit over 3 years now, almost 3.5 years, and it was just kind of something new that I hadn't done before. Like I've also done a few meetups in the past, but I feel like this was, something that was a bit more. It was better to do like a live podcast, do an interview in front of an audience, etc. Have drinks like beers, pizza, etc. Like, it's just a cool thing to do, and it brings the community together. Um, there are people who come to these events who trade at home alone, like they don't speak to anyone, who's also actively trading, whereas they come along to an event like this and they actually have the opportunity to make some really solid connections with, like, professionals in the industry and other people who are trying to do similar things to them. So,
Hmm.
I think it creates a good opportunity, and it's a good opportunity for, people to connect, and it's also, it's a bit of fun.
Yeah, it's definitely a useful service. I mean, not to plug Convergent in the middle of your interview, but really that's what I'm after with Convergent trading is bringing serious people together to kind of form a bond, and hopefully that
Yeah.
grows into accountability and things like that. It's something that's sorely needed. Let's get into
Mm.
trading style. What are you currently trading?
Okay, so there's kind of two parts to how I'm trading. So with the firm, I'm trading equities on the Australian market, and my approach there is very discretionary. Uh, I've not been doing it for a long time,
Mhm.
but it's it's very discretionary. It's very simple. There's nothing sophisticated there. Um, a lot of it is trying to be in the stocks which are going to move the most that day. So ideally, I'm looking for a catalyst of some sort. Uh, that might be, I don't know, a great earnings release. It might be a takeover. It might be, you know, some sort of news which is price sensitive. The company might have had an example the other week. A company had a contract for $180 million. Something happened with the mining site. That contract lost half its value, was now only worth $90 million. Very bad news for the company. Company opened down something like 20% and continued to run down for the rest of the day, or for
Mhm.
most of the day. That sort of thing is beautiful because there's a lot of one-sided flow. So yeah, that's the sort of thing I'm doing there. It's just pretty much just watching price action, order flow, like market depth, etc. Um, Watching how price interacts around VWAP. Important, just very basic levels, and just trying to take a 1 to 2% move out of a stock. Um,
Just
on the
so
others,
just so we
oh yeah.
know, do you go after a particular sector, or is everything fair game for when you come in terms of finding what equities you're going to trade for that day?
Most of it's fair game. I mean, I like to focus on stocks which are under $20, under 10 if possible.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, you probably have some screening criteria anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I
'Cause
just like to see the stocks which are, up or down most that day. So I use real-time scanners for that sort of thing. Um, yeah. I mean, it's also sort of a bit of an experimental phase, and I'm sort of, learning a lot as I'm going as well.
Mhm. And in
So.
addition to that, you're also doing something else, right?
Yeah, so in addition to that, I, I'm now working with a small team. So I've got one other guy who's here in Sydney, and he's also a trader. And then I've got two guys who I'm working with who are actually in New York, and both very strong developers. So, most will, I presume most will probably know I've been very interested in the algorithmic side of trading, and that's sort of been my key focus the past couple of years. Uh,
Hmm. Okay.
and yes, I've started to put together a bit of a team because I feel like, that's a way to take it to the next level. These guys, I do know how to code, but these guys. are certainly much better at it than I am, and something that might take me, a week to put together they'll do it in a day. So it's sort of leveraging other people's skill sets, to drive the team forward. You don't have to be an expert at everything. You can be good at one thing, you bring it all together as a team, and you're going to create something much bigger, something much more scalable. And I think I think this is going to be a game changer for my own trading and for those involved.
Excellent. Back to being a prop trader manager, a trader manager, what challenges are you facing in that role with prop traders? What are the big problems you're having or challenges that you're having? Pain points?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if I have a great answer. I mean, a lot of the traders who I deal with are experienced traders. So I guess the firm I'm at, we're kind of a little bit unique in that sense, as though we don't really have many traders who are, who are just starting out. Most of these guys have been doing it for many years. Some of them are even old floor traders. But I guess one of the challenges, and this is probably a bit more specific to the Australian market, is just there's certain products that are commonly traded in Australia in the prop industry, at least, like bank bills, government bonds, etc. It's just very crowded, especially as those products are tied to interest rates. Interest rates haven't been moving here in Australia for the past couple of years, so I know there's certainly some people who are doing it tough. So I think maybe just the general market environment is very difficult at the moment. Yeah, I mean, I know. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll probably leave it there.
Yeah, okay. What do you think is the biggest obstacle facing traders in a prop environment? Having had experience in the environment that you're in, which is mainly an equities-based environment, what are the big issues these traders have? Would you say that it's the same answer? It's the fact that the market has low volatility and is very kind of controlled right now? Are there other issues that you believe traders struggle with that you come into contact with?
Yeah, so I might answer this. I might answer that question like this. So, I know of one of my mates, for example, is at a different firm, and he is more of a newer trader. And I was just catching up with him last week, and he's been there for, I don't know, maybe 9 months or so. And one of the big obstacles which he has is just the fees and the sort of the deal which he's been put on. For some new traders coming into prop, might not be aware of the particular fees and how the sort of deal structure can really actually affect your chance of making it as a trader. So, for example, there's desk fees. There is, if you're trading in the office, and I believe some firms will even charge you desk fees if you're not trading in the office, which I can't quite get my head around. There's also your platform costs, trading technologies or CQG or whatever platform you might be using for futures. And then also the profit split, is on not a great profit split. So you add all those things up, he's got to make a lot of money just to break even for the month. The rates he's paying, etc., aren't very favorable, quite expensive. So you add all these things up, and there's a lot of money. Well, you've got to make, quite a bit of money before you can actually break even for the month and actually begin to make money. And then when you do make money, you've got to give half of that or however much back to the firm. The firm I'm at is a little bit different in that regard, but this is a common theme. And I think a lot of maybe retail traders who aren't in the prop environment might not be aware of this, but it might be something they want to get into. So I think that's just something to be aware of, because that can certainly be a big obstacle for new traders coming into a prop environment, is making sure that you do have a fair deal. The fees aren't too high, you're on decent rates, etc. Obviously, as you make money, those things become start to lean more in your favor, but you've obviously got to get to that point where you are making money. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then a lot of these guys aren't on a salary either, so it's kind of a eat what you kill.
Yeah.
So
And that's common for prop, but the upside of prop is also the access to this kind of professional environment, access to other traders who may be making money, that can help you get over your hangups on whether or not you can make money. For me, going from wanting to be a trader to joining an equities trading firm and coming in and actually seeing that some of these guys are walking away with, net tens of thousands of dollars, of course, seems easy, but it's not.
mhm.
And that kind of offsets that, but it is definitely an expensive thing to take on, and you have to be very careful of how your deal's structured. I get a lot of questions about deals, prop deals, because I ran a prop shop, and some of the deals I see, I would never sign. But you're right, there's a lot of overhead that needs to be overcome. It's an expensive business depending on how you're set up, right?
Yeah, I just think it's one thing that you should be mindful of, and if you are coming into prop, is maybe just to think about, and I know it can be a little bit difficult to find out sort of what the going rate is, or that sort of thing, what other firms are doing. But if you can, it's probably a good thing to try and find out.
hmm Okay, so you already told us that you're working on algo trading. What makes you, what got you into that? Is it because you felt that, hey, I want to take my emotions out of this, and I'd rather computerize this and just play the statistics, or what led you to want to go from discretionary to algo?
Yeah, so at the time when I first started thinking about, maybe this was something I wanted to pursue further, being algorithmic trading, is I had this idea for a strategy, and this is a few years back. I had this idea for a strategy, and I could pretty much write it down on paper. I could say, when this happens and this happens and this happens, I want to do this. I want to manage the trade like this. So essentially, like a very specific trading plan. And then it kind of occurred to me one day that if I had the ability to program, to write code, I could probably actually put what I'd written down on paper, into code, and run that over historical data. And then it could actually tell me if what I was attempting to trade, did that work in the past? In its most simplest form, I kind of had that realization. I was like, well, if that's possible to do, why am I not doing that? Instead, I'm continuing to put real money on the line every day and trying to sort of hope or think that, that there is an edge to be had here. So that's kind of what got me into it. And then I guess one thing's led to another. And I think nowadays it wasn't so much to try and take the emotion out of it. For me, I don't think the emotional side of it has been something I've struggled with too much.
hmm
Um,
Okay.
yeah, I also think it's one of the things which really appeals to me nowadays about, or currently about algorithmic trading, is the fact that it's hugely scalable. So as a a click trader, or someone who's just trading what they see, you can only have your eyes on so many things at a time. Whereas the technology, the data, and all those things which are available to us now, you know, it's it just seems crazy to me not to try and leverage all those things. Um, so I think it's a way to create something much bigger than yourself.
Okay. This is just a broad question just to extract some of your thoughts and experience. A scenario is a very dear person to you, say your son, daughter, niece, nephew, somebody who's really important to you, comes to you and wants to learn to trade. What would you prescribe to them in order to make it as quick and productive as possible? What would you tell them to pursue, or how should they pursue it in order to become a profitable trader?
Yeah, this is funny you asked this actually because someone who's fairly close to me actually asked a similar question the other day. And I really had to think about how to explain it. I mean, one of the first things I'd say is, be prepared. You've just got to be prepared to lose money. Um, like, coming into this, you're not going to be profitable from the get-go. So, just understand it's not going to come easy, and it's something you're going to have to work at for a long time before you see any results. Um, but besides that, besides being a major buzzkill, um, I mean, I think first of all, you've got to get a solid understanding of what is the market, and that what is the market, maybe some basic technical analysis. I don't really use technical analysis, but I think, it's a good primer on trading. Maybe reading, maybe Market Wizards. I know it's a cliche thing to say. Listen to a
Hmm.
couple of the interviews I've done. I think also, and this is maybe something I should have done a bit sooner, is actually just sit there and watch the order book. Whether you want to be, an intraday trader, you want to be a scalper, or maybe you want to be a swing trader, just actually watching order flow, I think has huge benefits to actually understand what is a market. Like you can see when you first come into trading, you just see numbers moving on a screen. But the more you watch it and get to actually understand what's going on behind those numbers, um, I think that's really key. Whether you become a scalper or not, actually understanding what's going on, what's driving those numbers, what are the participants doing here?
Hmm.
Who's more aggressive? How does price interact around certain levels, etc. So I think just a lot get first of all getting some basic knowledge on the subject. I think then um, just putting in some screen time. Don't have to sit there and trade and fund an account right away. Just get some screen time. Um, I think what else can you do? Get a demo account, trade that for a little bit, but I would say try and fund an account fairly quickly. And when I say fairly quickly, I mean don't use demo for too long because it's just not the same. For me personally, I mean it might be different for others, but I just can't take it seriously if I'm trading on demo. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And you don't have to trade big size and try and hit home runs right away. In fact, I'd discourage that. So I think you've just got to focus, put some just small amounts of money. I know that can be a little bit difficult to do in futures, but in equities, for example, you can buy one share, you can buy 10 shares, 100 shares, like very small amounts. Um,
Yeah,
just
as
put
long
some
as your
real money on the
costs are
line.
reasonable, right? As long as you
Yeah,
have a good brokerage or commission deal,
right.
that's
That's
not
that's
going to be an issue.
something. Yeah, that's well worth pointing out also. Um, but just focus on trying to make good trades, and then once you begin to get a little bit of consistency and making good trades, not trying to make good money, just trying to make good trades, then you can begin to just do it a little bigger and do it a little bigger, and then you can just slowly but steadily scale up. You don't have to rush into it. But I think, yeah, that's one of the things that you should be focusing. I mean, that's one of the things I focus on, most days, is just trying to make good trades.
The process again.
Yeah, very much so.
I'm going to back you up just a little bit with the algo trading. The fact that you moved over into algo trading, was that driven by a guest or someone that had you thinking, man, I should pursue that idea more seriously and really go after it and find coders and things like that? Or is it something you just always wanted to explore on your own?
It definitely wasn't something I always wanted to explore. I mean, I didn't even know it existed before starting the podcast. That's how naive I was. So yeah, I think through doing the podcast, it was something that I became aware of for sure. And I mean, if I hadn't done the podcast, I probably would have become aware of it at some point as well. But it was new at me at the time I came across it. So yeah, and it just made a lot of sense to me. And I know, some guys who make serious money who don't know the first thing about algo trading. So it's not something you have to do, but it's just one of those things which appealed to me, and I found it quite interesting. And yeah, I just wanted to go harder with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Supporting you. How can listeners support your show, your trading maybe? What steps can they take? We can definitely provide them with the information to get in touch with you, but I don't know what listeners can do to support Chat with Traders and push you towards your full potential. Anything in particular?
Not really. I mean, the biggest thing is just check out the podcast if you're interested in it. It's available on iTunes. It's available on Spotify. I believe Google has a new podcast app which has just come out in the past week or two. So I think that's available on Android. The podcast is available on YouTube. It's a SoundCloud. So I mean, that's by listening to the podcast, that's all I need.
Very cool. All right, that's all I had as far as questions. I did mesh in some questions that I got by email into the mix. Yoda, do we have anything we want to cover?
No. We've just got a comment. Love your podcast. Funny that now that Murad's the interviewer, I think I found out about Murad from listening to the podcast. So
somewhat incestuous.
I don't know if there's any other questions anybody has. If so, here we go. Can you please ask more about crypto trading and arbitrage?
Are you involved in that in any way, Aaron? Crypto, arbitrage trading, that sort of stuff?
So I bought some crypto just to hodl.
How's that going?
Well, let's just put it this way. I'm still green on most things. So I bought sort of early last year. I don't know. I mean, I didn't have enough money in it for it to become life-changing money, so I just kind of held it. Yeah, I don't care. It's just a bit of fun. It's just sitting there. It's not going to affect my life in any way. Yeah, so I've never traded cryptocurrencies. Sure, you can make money doing that. You can make money in stocks. You can make money in futures. I mean, there's opportunity all around. Am I involved in any arbitrage? No. Although it is, we will be looking at some of those things. The team I'm working with, probably not so much in crypto markets, but equities and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
More quant strategies.
Are you mainly holding main coins or altcoins in crypto?
Just the major ones.
Just the main ones.
Yeah, I wasn't brave enough to try my hand at any of those any of the shady coins that are around.
Okay.
I just didn't really get into the spaces that much. I've had a few guests on the podcast who are very much into it. I guess if you wanted to check out one episode on the subject, I'd recommend the episode with Bobby Cho from DRW Trading. So they're actually one of the biggest market makers in Bitcoin.
Interesting.
Aaron, you have a listener who listens regularly to your podcast and was just wondering if you can explain why some of your shows have been removed from your podcast alignment.
So I haven't removed any except one episode, which was a very early episode, and that was removed at the request of the guest who I had on that episode. Besides that, every episode's online.
Do they feel that they shared too much proprietary information, or they just didn't want to be out in the public eye, maybe?
I'm not sure on the reasons for it. I mean, I didn't really ask any questions. I just kind of respect their request to do so. So, it's one episode out of 100 and over 160. So, yeah.
Okay. Another listener is wondering if you've read the book on Jesse Livermore yet.
No, I've not read it. I kind of don't want to read it because everyone keeps telling me to read it. So I guess I'm a bit stubborn like that.
Contrarian.
Yeah, exactly. I'm always reading different bits and pieces. I don't really read that many trading books, to be honest. One book I will recommend because I think this really helped change the way I think about things. Like often you read books and they might hype you up for a little bit or they might make you think differently for a little while, but it kind of fades. This book I think has had a lasting effect on me, and that's Fooled by Randomness by Nassim Taleb. That's a book I'd highly recommend you read. I mean, there's a lot of ego in the book, but if you can look past that, it's there's a lot of I really like the way he thinks about things.
Yeah, Nassim Taleb tends to want to bash somebody else when he writes. He's a very smart guy, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Do we have anything else? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say he's also an ex options trader, so it's cool because there are a few trading references throughout the book, but it's not like a quote unquote trading book. Like it's not going to give you strategies or anything like that. It's just pretty much what the title says, Fooled by Randomness.
Yeah, it's a mindset thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Another comment. Love your show, Aaron. What would you advise for a person that's been trading for about 8 months the ES Mini futures and just can't seem to bust through to a profitable stage? Seems to be stuck on fear of losing.
Well, I mean, if you're scared of losing money, I mean, obviously that's something you've got to get past, and you've got to accept that you are going to lose money as a trader. Like the best traders lose money. Hopefully they make money more times than they lose, but it's part of it. So I'd say maybe trade smaller or make sure that you're trading with money, which if you lose, it's not going to make any difference on your life. So, don't trade with your life savings or whatever, put a couple grand in an account or whatever's required, but make sure that, that's not money that you need. Like if you were to lose all that money tomorrow, would your life be any different? That's maybe the few things I'd suggest is trade with money you can afford to lose. Don't worry about losing that money. I know that's easier said than done, but that's the truth. And also maybe trade a bit smaller if possible. Maybe even one thing to do is you might be more qualified to answer this question, but I know with futures, sort of each tick has a higher tick value, has a higher value. Maybe you could trade like an ETF or something like that. I don't know if that's a good suggestion, but
no, it's
like
true. It's correct. You want to, depending on your account size, and it's a function of account size because you don't You don't want to risk so much per trade, and if your account's getting dwindled down to the point that every loss is now eating 10% of your account, then fear is going to set in. But you know, the problem that's being shared here is a core issue for everybody, and I have talked about it quite a bit. There are many things you can do to help remedy this, but the bottom line is, just like Aaron was talking about, that one trade coming in, he came in and he felt pretty confident and he decided to trade bigger size, and it's a trade that just didn't work. It may have made him feel like the man for the day, but it didn't work out, and so he didn't feel like the man for the day. The fact is, your very next trade has an equal probability of winning and losing. Every single trade does, because it's an infinite series that you're trading. It's not a closed series. It's simple statistics. It sounds like you're not accepting the risk that you're taking, and you're not accepting or maybe not fully understanding or vetting out your actual plan, because it shouldn't surprise you and it shouldn't bother you. I'm saying shouldn't very, very lightly here with a heavy bag of sugar, salt on top of it. It's hard to detach yourself from the emotional aspect, but understand a couple things. And I don't care what you trade, whether it's real estate or cars or futures or stocks or options, that very next trade can work out or cannot work out. The outcome is absolutely and positively random for the particular outcome, not so for the series. So it's really important for you to know that, hey, with my method, I have this likelihood over a series of 50 trades to be losing money on X amount. The bad news in this question is, how much are you losing when you're losing? Because people who don't like to lose tend to defend their loss. And when you defend your loss, you feed it and you make it much worse. And this is a problem not just for you. This is a problem for professional prop traders when they're learning, and floor traders who move to electronic have blown up, millions of dollars trying to fight this demon. So it's just something you need to work through, and the only way around it is to just accept that your outcome is not going to be what you want it to be, and to make sure you survive. That's the key element, is to survive your losses, because if you run out of money, then game over for you. You've got to go away. We need to wrap up. Is there anything else, Yoda?
There's just one last quick question. Someone was asking about your prop trading firm and whether your traders in the prop firm are discretionary and or system traders.
Both. That is probably the simplest way to say it. There's certainly a lot of guys who are discretionary, and there's also one side to the business which is more sort of technology heavy and sort of more algorithmic. But yeah, there's many discretionary, so it's kind of a blend of both.
That's very common these days. Very cool. We appreciate everybody coming in. We definitely appreciate Aaron taking the time this morning and hanging out with us from Australia for an hour. Thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us in this interview. This will be available very soon via YouTube, podcasts, Facebook, all over the place. You'll be able to get a hold of it. There are some parts of the interview that I would definitely listen to again. I know I will, especially the 6 ways to emulate successful traders. That was excellent. We will include the references, including the book reference, in the show notes and on the web page associated with this interview. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and thanks, Yoda, for moderating the questions for us. Have a good night, everybody. Take care.
Cool. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.